Once again, as always, every week by legendary strength coach Dan John. And today we're going to pick up on a theme that pick up on a theme that I've seen Dan discuss before. We've discussed it before, and that is whether everybody should pick up weight off the ground. The deadlift, is it utterly indispensable? Should everybody be deadlifting, or is there a more nuanced position that can be had? Who knows? Maybe some things really are just black and white, yes or no, or maybe not. Dan, great to see you as always. How's your training been this week?
Good. Yesterday I got in 2 walks, which is great. The weather here, we've had a lot of snow, which is great. We've had this drought for years, and but the cold, we're just hovering for our international listeners, -2, -3, in the 20s, and so
How's that in your home gym? Does it get cold in
no,
there when
it's
it's
no,
outside?
20
Yeah.
outside is 20 inside. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Yesterday I was able to get 2 walks in, but it was fascinating. The second one was it was it was right before dinner. I made dinner right when I got in, and I turned the corner and the sun was setting, and the difference in about I don't know I'm going to exaggerate, I'm sure, but 30 seconds was like from I can deal with this to I don't know about this. It was
Mhm.
yeah good. Lots and lots of presses lately. I've been working my glutes and my presses, trying to just I think this is the future for me. I think in the winter months, it's going to be what I learned when I first got on the line from that group of women called Moo Cow. Wonderful group. Presses and glutes when in doubt, and
Mm.
either squat or deadlift. Or for me, I do some front squats. I do hip thrusts. I do deficit deadlifts. I do clamshells. But it's just one of
Yeah.
those. And I like it. 3 days a week, I'm doing a lot of pressing. 3 days a week, I'm doing a lot of glute work and a lot of mobility, and I feel good. Um, Not much to report in the world. I'm getting ready for a road trip. If
Oh, cool.
I'll be in Wisconsin on Tuesday.
I won't be.
Okay,
We're
that's
actually going to Florida. It figures, right? The one time Dan is in my state. We're taking off for Florida on Saturday for a little getaway with the in-laws. So
that's fantastic. Good for you. I'm glad to hear
yeah.
that.
Yeah. So anyways, that's we'll talk about that and
Sure, sure.
whatever. All right, so deadlifting. Dan, we've talked about this before. It's interesting how exercises can have such a cult following, right?
Yeah,
And there are some exercises that seem to be more susceptible to this than others. We know that the swing has its fan group, and look, I'm a fan of all these exercises in a broad sense. The get up is another one, and the deadlift, of course, might be the biggest one of all. And by the when I say cult following, I mean like
oh yeah,
we mean like people who say like if you do not do this exercise, right? It's hard to say even if you're human at this point, right? Like
right.
you're lower than a brute. It's not only a useful exercise, it's just if you don't do this exercise, why do anything at all? Is a
If
sort of
I
is it, mhm.
if we post something on Instagram that makes fun of one-handed swings and Turkish get-ups, I will get more. I mean, if I need to up my feed, just say negative things against Turkish get-ups and one-handed swings. And it
Mm.
doesn't matter how nuanced my point is. I can and somebody said that I was fear mongering the other day. Literally said that I was fear mongering because I have concerns about one-handed swings. I've always had it because if you start torquing at the bottom, you'll see a lot of people, their chin, sternum, zipper line, they'll start to torque at the bottom like this. And I just know from my experience as a thrower, that's where bad things start to happen. And listen, don't listen to me. Listen to Stu McGill. Listen to Tom Myers. Listen to people who really know what's going on.
Mhm.
And they'll tell you the same thing. Ballistic, weird rotation, uh, twisty rotation, ballistic with load, with exhaustion is probably a bad combination.
Mm,
In the
mhm.
same way, if you're in a area and you have to make a water decision, like I did in Egypt,
Yeah.
and it's 120 degrees, and you decide to drink out of some water that you're making a choice between, do I want to die of dehydration or do I want to die of whatever's in the water? Yeah, I chose the water, and it took me 3 years to fix it. So if you want to do one-handed swings, you chose the water.
So let's we're going to do another episode of one on swings and get-ups, gentle listeners. I promise. This one I want to focus on the deadlift. It's funny, Dan. I get emails and messages. I'm sure you get something like this. It goes something like this. I'm going to make it a little cartoonish, but it's not that far off. Somebody will email me and they're like, Pat, things are going great. I'm 8% body fat. I used to be 350 pounds. I'm married to the perfect woman. I've got the dream job. My muscles are as big as they could possibly be as one of them. But should I be deadlifting? I'm not deadlifting. Am I missing out on something at this point, right? And that kind of like gets at this mentality that I'm talking about. There's this cult out there.
Yeah.
That
the back squat cult is just as bad as
it's just as bad, right?
The back squat cult and the Turkish get-up cult. They're
all out there, right?
Little forums, and they all, yeah, man, yeah, right on, yeah, Dan John sucks, right. Yeah. But these guys, and universally the Turkish get-uppers who can't press, they can't press light bells, and the squat crazies can't stand up from a chair because their bellies catch the table. Oh, he said that.
Oh,
let's just cut to the chase, folks. Appropriate deadlift is great. If there are a full range of deadlift variation. Let's even slide it to hinge variations, and I think that there's value in hinging 2 to 5 times a week, hinging with load 2 to 5 times a week, but you have to ensure that it's a hinge variation that works with your genetics first, because some people are more adept at hinging than squatting. Extremely tall people have to have adaptations for hinging. First off, so your genetics. Number 2, your injury history. If you've been in you got T-boned when you're in your Ferrari at 300 miles an hour, you might have a different set of issues than somebody who's walked the Appalachian Trail 5 times and has never had any back issues.
Right.
So number 1, genetics. Number 2, your injury history. Number 3 is what works for you, and sometimes what works for you. Like, I never got anything out of the Romanian deadlift until I went to the RKC and learned how to swing. When I got back, my brain said, well, the Romanian deadlift is a swing movement. And I was like, oh, so sometimes your experience and your education would be number 3, being taught correctly something, or when you connect the dots. So those are 3 caveats: genetics, injury history, and your experience education. You got to make sure you know what you're doing. Now listen, and in fact, someone made fun again. I made a comment about I've only deadlifted 3 times in my life, heavy deadlift. And the guy said, well, if you got up to 800, you'd have thrown far. That's not true. I wouldn't have. Right. Having an 800-pound deadlift has no carryover to throwing the discus.
Not relevant.
600, I think it does. John, I got John Powell's journals right here, and one of his best seasons of his life, he finally broke the 600-pound deadlift barrier. And LJ Sylvester, by the way, world record holder in 1961-62, in an article in American Athlete, said if he could get his deadlift up to 400, he'd think he could throw farther. Because remember, in the 50s and 60s, when people lifted weights, they simply lifted weights. They were oddballs enough. They didn't have to they didn't have to get into pissy fights with each other over,
Yeah, so that's really good, Dan, and it was along the lines of where I expected you would go with it. And we said this before, that pretty much no exercise is indispensable, right? And we're fans of deadlifting. The only exception is, like, let's go back to the hypothetical person who said they've are essentially living their dream life, but feels like guilty for some reason because they're not doing the one exercise everyone says you should be doing, right? Yeah, and they should. Of course, you should always just feel guilty. It's just a matter of default psychology. But putting that aside, the question is, do you like deadlifting? And they're like, well, not really. Okay. Do you want to be a world-class deadlifter? Oh, no, I don't care about that at all. Okay, great. You don't need it. Keep doing what you're doing. Happy with where you are. Don't like deadlifting. Don't care about being a world-class deadlifter, because it's that final one where, okay, now it's probably indispensable, right? If you just want to be the best at this particular exercise. But in terms of just getting generally strong, well-muscled, it's not indispensable. Is it helpful for a lot of people? Oh, certainly. Absolutely. But not indispensable. And going back to some of the things you said, Dan, it might actually make sense that people select some other type of exercise when it comes to the hinging pattern or something like that. So yeah, build on that, Dan, please, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, when I first got to Utah State, the athletes before me were frustrating Coach Mon because their weight workouts 3 days a week was bench and half squat. Now they said they were squatting, but I saw one of the guys squat one time, and trust me, and when I say half squat, I'm being generous, okay? And when I got there, I was Olympic lifting. Now here's the thing: those guys are 160, low 170 throwers. I was 190 thrower. So I'm not the folks. When I say something like that, I'm not bragging. I'm trying to make an important point. I think if you want to throw a discus far, you need to have the Olympic lifts and the power lifts. You have to be good at them at some level. You need to be good at all 6 of them: press, snatch, clean and jerk, deadlift, squat, bench press. I think. So now, having said that, if you clean 300, then you probably don't really need to worry about your deadlift. Your deadlift is probably locked and loaded. You just need to test it. I always tested it with bets. So if you're another person and you're a 25-year-old and you go to the spa and you do 3 sets of 9 different machine exercises and you feel great, you look great, you have a spring in your step, I don't necessarily going to tell you to change that. Now, over time, it would be certainly nice to have some other things that you do, but I think your point is right on. There's a phrase for it where you feel like you're missing something. I remember reading. I used to read Playboy magazine for the articles, and there was always this. There was this great cartoon one time, and the guy looked up from his newspaper to his wife. I feel like the whole world's in an orgy except for me. And I think that a lot of people look up from their computer, their magazine, their book, and think the whole world is deadlifting, high rep back squatting, Turkish get upping, one hand swinging, doing program minimums to exhaustion, and they're cross lifting across the modal domains. And I'm just sitting here making good progress. I need to change.
Right. Yeah, you nailed it, Dan. That's exactly the message I wanted to convey, right? Is that, as always, there's a balance to be struck, right? It's true that, there's not really any one size fits all thing for everybody. But at the same time, it's like there are things that we know that are generally useful and helpful for most people most of the time as well, right? So, being completely contrarian and haphazard about everything probably isn't a wise approach either. Yet you just trying to model exactly what somebody else is doing because they do it or it works for them might not be the most prudent approach ever. And as always, trying to carve out what we think is that sort of reasonable middle ground is not always the easiest thing to do. Maybe we should just go back to fear mongering. That might be.
Years ago, Paul Northway looked at my journal, and there was a line in there: do something unique, stand apart. And he goes, "You wrote that, didn't you?" I go, "Well, I did." But Paul was in high school. I go, "And I wrote that in high school." So I wasn't saying I was a total contrarian in high school. That's not. I am obviously. I hope the gentle listeners know that I am a different breed of cat. I'm not. I'm not. I mean, I don't. It's hard to. I on the Pat Flynn show, I allow myself a certain box, but I'm not a. You've been with me in real life. I a varied interest. I'm a normal guy in most places, but I am a bit of a contrarian. And I've always thought that if somebody says you must deadlift 3 days a week as the answer to our questions, my first response is deadlift is not important. Let's go because I'm going to go defeat that person and their athletes by doing what they're not doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that and I'm always trying to look for edges against my opponents.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the easiest edges is I look at their programs, their strength programs, their offensive and defensive schemes,
Mm-hmm.
and just try to look at ways that will, upsell, to knock the donkey cart off. Yeah.
And again, very great, Dan. And I just want to emphasize again what we're not saying. Nowhere have we said here that we don't like the deadlift, that the deadlift is not useful, or that people shouldn't do it for whatever reason. All we've said is that we don't think for a lot of people that it's utterly indispensable. And I would say the same thing about pretty much any exercise, right? Swings, presses, any of it, right? I love them all. But to me, again, unless like you're a specific athlete or you want to be the best in the world at that exercise, there's many tools that are available to us that we can use for our fitness pursuits.
And I hope the listeners are listening, because a lot of our episodes kind of come around the same topic of, and I'm going to summarize all of them right now for you. Either or. And either or is considered in theology is kind of the carp of theology. It's bottom feeding. Whenever you get yourself in a situation where someone is forcing you into an either or, you'll notice, by the way, Tucker Carlson on Fox News is a master of either or. And then I'm sure there's other outlets that are masters of either or in a different direction.
All mainstream outlets are. I mean, that's the problem with mainstream outlets and social media in general, is we know that what gets attention is tribalism. You're either in the group or you're out of the group,
which is either or.
Which is all. I don't want to say all, but very many influencers, right?
Right.
And certainly all like mainstream outlets as well. That's just the formula, right? And if you don't want to fall into that formula because you think that nuance is important, you are, as I think we do, Dan, putting yourself at a structural disadvantage, right? You're right.
I would love to be much more, hey, you jackasses there. Listen, if you're not doing the Dan John program, you're the biggest idiot of all time.
You are subprimal.
You're subprimal.
You're subliver.
But I just sit back as I even say that. I want to laugh out loud because, that I could walk up the flight of stairs, slip on some dog drool, twist my ankle, and that radically changes what I just said. So the biggest issue with the Pat Flynn show, which comes out, which I join every week, and I'm going to tell you, this is where you're wrong, Pat, is that the answer is usually both and you're wrong for not acknowledging both and. You're wrong. You're wrong, Pat Flynn.
That's what we need to do. We need to figure out how to tribalize the non-tribalism. That will be our secret.
Money,
success,
money, man. If you're not tribe, you're not.
That's right. That's right. I actually sent an email about that the other day. I have to bring it up again. I did a podcast with Alex on a little bit longer of I don't know if you saw this whole controversy over the food compass, Dan. Did you see this thing? Anyways, long story short, here's what happened. So there's this food compass thing which came out from researchers at Tufts University.
Oh, the Tufts, by the way, I get the Tufts health and wellness newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
I think I get it. I think it costs me about $20-25 a year.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. I'm just telling you. The nice thing is it's balanced and insightful. And I'm going to say another one too. AARP's monthly newsletter has great nutritional information because once again, they look on both sides of things and give you a reasoned response. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is not me bashing Tufts, but here's the interesting thing where you had two tribes where both tribes were wrong on important things, right? So Tufts researchers put together this food compass thing, and there's sort of ranking system in there, hierarchical of like food healthiness, right? So Joe Rogan got a hold of one of the graphics and shared it, and it looked really sketchy because it like had like Lucky Charms ranking higher than cheese and steak, and so people exploded. right?
Oh,
So
one that had Cheerios up really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me situate it for people, and I want to get your thoughts on it, Dan. So everyone started freaking out, like, this is ridiculous. The title of Rogan's post said that it was like the new government food period, which was wrong. This has nothing to do with the government. This is from Tufts
Wait, Joe
University.
Rogan
Right?
said something that was wrong?
But get this, he wasn't the only one that was wrong, because the whole evidence-based fitness circle crowd comes out, starts blasting Rogan and all his followers, saying, you guys are idiots. They're slobbering on their Instagram stories, shouting, saying, you guys never do your homework, you never read. This wasn't comparing foods cross categories, right? So you guys are fools. Now, if you looked at the graphic, it sure as hell seemed like it was comparing foods cross categories, but they insisted in unison in one voice that Rogan and his followers were idiots. Turns out they were wrong. They didn't do their homework. Alan Aragon and other people pointed out, if you actually do read the original paper, it is, the comparisons are cross. Rogan was right on that point. He was wrong about the government food pyramid, but he was right about that point. So you had two tribes, right? One tribe, the evidence-based fitness crowd, that pretends to be above tribalism, that says you shouldn't parrot people, you should really look into things. For some reason, we're just parroting whoever first started this in their tribe, didn't actually do their homework, and made an ass of themselves. Now, Rogan, you don't. I don't really follow Rogan. I don't expect a whole bunch of them. But I just thought that was a very ironic situation. Now, you can say whatever you want about the Tufts food scaling and hierarchy, but it's just a really funny thing where you had these two tribes, one which is supposed to transcend tribalism, acting extremely tribalistically, and being wrong on the thing that they're and for the same reason that they're accusing other people being wrong, which is not doing their homework and research. Very fascinating situation. Couldn't have been more entertaining. Your thoughts on all that? I don't know if you even witnessed it.
No, but it does remind me of the way you're supposed to do things. Hold on, let me see. I moved my books around so I'd be more organized. Hang on just a second. There's a great book. Obviously there's a great book, and who can forget it? And it was right there. It was somewhere. It's Mary and Dan Eads, the protein power, the one that was really good before they fell in love with the slow burn bullshit. Sorry, kids. But they talk about this thing called the ORAC test, ORAC, and it's a ranking of phytochemicals. It's a polyphenols and all that. And but they probably spend 7 or 8 paragraphs showing you that don't run down this road with this information, don't go down that road with this information, don't go this road with that information. And at the end, they tell you, I think it's blueberries, blackberries, and I'll just guess the third one, raspberries. Those are the 3 highest ranked foods in ORAC. But they've already told you all the problems. For one thing, I don't think you can live on blueberries. And if you did, it would be very cost prohibitive, and you'd be eating
once this show makes it big time, that's the first thing I'm going to do is I'm finally going to be able to buy blueberries, right? That's when you know you made the big time, and even out of season. Then you first for that, then the yacht, right?
Yeah. So one of the things I liked about what the Eads did is before they said that, and by the way, and I'm going to say a sentence that I may or may not be right. Eating Cheerios, and I guess Cheerios was one of the things on the list, and they said Cheerios was good, and well, here's the thing about Cheerios, and I'm not, by the way, I'm gentle listener, I'm not saying Cheerios is good or bad, but since they refortify it, there are a lot of, if you're going to do by vitamins and minerals, fortified cereals is pretty good because it's like eating vitamin tablets. If you eat white rice with 7 or 8 different vitamin and mineral tablets, you're going to have a pretty damn good vitamin and mineral profile. Now, the problem is you also just put it with one of the most, diabetic inducing foods there is, according to my friends who are diabetic. Okay. I guess white rice is an issue. That's what someone told me with diabetes, because it's especially the kind that's 5-minute ready. So whenever you look at these things where they're doing the real science and they're just looking at the numbers of vitamins and minerals, fortified foods, putting vitamin D in whole milk makes whole milk a good resource for vitamin D. Not putting vitamin D in whole milk makes whole milk not a good resource for vitamin D. Yeah. So I always feel bad for conscientious researchers in nutrition, both the two of them, because that was a little joke. Because no matter what they do or say, well, first off, the United States government goes after them. I mean, we heavily subsidize something called sorghum, corn, soy, dairy, and wheat. Heavily subsidize it. So anything that comes from the American, and I'm not being like I'm no conspiracy theorist. This just so that's
there's just perverse incentives across so many different industries all the time, right? Yeah.
And I said it before. That's why I tend to focus more on the Norwegian studies, the Swedish and Finnish studies when it comes to nutrition, because the upside of being a socialist country is you're not being bought by corporations when it comes to like nutrition. University of Oslo is just studying what's the best breakfast and not worrying about making Kellogg's and General Mills happy, and all the senators from Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, they don't have to deal with all that. So if you do an honest study, and this is a very nuanced kind of point. If you're doing an honest study and you're just looking at the nutritional components of food, fortified foods do very well, because that's what you're looking at is vitamin mineral. If you take a vitamin mineral tablet with the fiber one, you're going to have an outstanding profile for that meal. But honestly, long term, is that the best direction you want to go? You follow my point?
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of and Aragon had a great critique of these sort of food ranking systems in general, of why they're not really all that helpful because of so much missing context and stuff like that. But it's also understandable of how in various ways they are assembled and organized. So if people want the details about the controversy I described and a good critique of these ranking systems, there are a lot of good researchers out there. Aragon is on his Instagram would be a good resource for people, right?
Yeah. I had a follow up and dropped out of my brain because it was a rage follow up, and my rage brain isn't functioning as well.
Isn't activated yet. Well, maybe it will come back at some point. But all of that was to say is that
this week a couple of self-reported studies came out again on different things, and when you look at them, so by the way, people who self-report being on keto don't feel as good as people who self-report on Ornish. Well, guess what? How does anybody trust self-reporting? This is my journal. The bulk of it's true. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is just Dan's fantasies about what he actually did. Here's my walking log. I try to keep it real honest, but there are times where my walking log is an I wrote down yesterday. I walk 4 miles. I'm pretty sure on two. I did the same route twice, and I'm pretty sure it's 2 miles. I got no idea. So if 50 years from now, how did Dan John stay in such great shape at 65? Well, he walked 4 miles on a Monday one time in 20-degree weather. Well, that's what I self-reported.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to do another episode taking a little bit more of a longer conversation through the nutritional and exercise sciences. If people aren't familiar, it kind of gets overlooked, but there is this whole replication issue in science right now, and it's a major issue, like a major issue. And of course, I don't think you should be cynical that this is a major issue if people haven't looked into the replication issue, but it should not want you to like put all of your eggs in the peer-reviewed basket, so to speak, right? And to me, to be a good sort of evidence-based person is, you want to keep up on the research. What is it saying? But that's going to always be in relation to traditional wisdom, mentors, personal experience in the trenches with other people, real world sort of stuff. And a good coach, to my mind, is somebody who tries to balance and proportion all those things together. Right. Mm-hmm.
One of the few studies I've ever trusted was called the Minnesota study. It was the Minnesota starvation study, where they took all these conscientious objectors and they had them eat 1,200 calories a day, strictly monitored. No, this was 12. And within, what was it, 3 weeks, most of them started to act insane. Within 4 weeks, no one was acting anymore. Guys were licking their plates after every meal for minutes at a time. They started getting repetition issues. They started having nightmares involving food. When you go online, look up the number of fitness experts who recommend 1,200 calories a day. Now, here's the funny thing. We know from good research that will literally turn you insane. And yet people will write online that they live on 1,200 calories a day or 50 bananas or whatever the hell it is.
Good luck. Let's take some questions. So we turn to some questions now, Dan.
Deadlifts. I like deadlifts. I think they're really good. If they work for you, do them. If they don't, find a variation. There.
Perfect. There's your 1 minute summary. Here's a theoretical question from the Flash. Apologies for the weird question, but it would help me to grasp the concept. Theoretically, for example, if you match the volume, are the hypertrophy and strength gains the same doing 50 reps, deadlifting in a 12-hour period, or 50 by 10 in a single session? Hope this makes sense. Thank you, guys.
Well, you're using deadlifts for hypertrophy. Huh. I would just say, first off, Flash, I think it's nice that your ex-girlfriend gave you that nickname, but I don't think that's... Did you like it? Did you see where I went there? Yeah. You answered, Pat.
So I'm trying to understand it. Strength gains are the same doing 50 reps in a 12-hour period or 5 by 10 in a single. No. It depends on other variables, right? So, what's the density? What's the intensity, right? So intensity is going to be a major variable there.
Well,
and
actually, it's density. If you think that much time to do a workout, that'd be a very undense workout, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be, right. And depending if you're doing, 5 sets of 10 reps, but you're using a much lighter load compared to if you just do doubles, 25 sets of 2 throughout the day, the response to that is going to be significantly different in terms of strength and hypertrophy, right? Because the lower, heavier rep sets will, generally speaking, be more conducive for strength, but not all that useful for hypertrophy. Not as useful anyways. Whereas once you start pushing those reps up, even as the intensity goes down, if you're at least still within a relatively high intensity for that rep range, then yes, the higher rep sets done in a short amount of time will have more of a hypertrophy benefit. So if I'm understanding and reading this right, the answer is just no. It depends on other variables.
Now, for strength, basically, which is a neurological learning. I mean, I hate to say strength is learning. Getting strong is learning to become.
It's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
And you look at Maffei tones, every hour on the hour method of training. That's going to probably teach those frequent bouts with time in between are probably going to make you better at the learning curve for strength will be assisted. For hypertrophy, 5 sets of 10 is going to be in a short amount of time is going to be better than over 12 hours because of the density factor. Okay, right? But neither option is I don't think either option is optimal because 5 sets of 10 in the deadlift let's just say hinge variation, because my thought is doing crane style, alternate grip deadlifting, and I'm not sure how good that is.
That was a good question, and hopefully he found that to be a useful response. Here's a fun question, Dan. Riachiona Again, I probably pronounced this wrong last week. I apologize.
He's a good follower.
Thank you. And question is, what new skills are we currently learning? Are we learning any new skills, Dan? Why don't you go first?
Yeah, old dog, new tricks, man.
Mm-hmm.
I am actively trying to expand my cooking. All my skills, reazione, in the area of cooking and food. So, my sauerkraut, my sauerkraut experiment. I'm now basically I make sauerkraut about once every 2 months. I found that if I make four 2-quart jars, that lasts. I eat my own homemade sauerkraut about once or twice a day. Once a day for sure, usually twice. So that's something I'm learning. I'm also trying to learn. I'm making limoncello now, which is a wonderful digestif. It's fascinating to watch nature work. You take the peels off a bunch of lemons, you drop it in some crappy vodka, and a month later, God makes a delicious drink. But I'm also very, very. I'm really trying to 3 nights a week. I'm trying very hard to experiment with new meals. Last night I made it was pork chops. It was pork chops, zucchini, onions and zucchini, and then Yukon Gold mashed potatoes with the skins on. But this is something very simple. So I took some barbecue sauce, melted some butter in it, melted a little bit of chicken broth, whipped it up, and that was the gravy for the mashed potatoes. And I never have thought that barbecue sauce would be a delightful. It is so much better than beige gravy. I was stunned, and so it's just so I'm trying things like that. I've added different flavors in the last month. I mean, I've played around with small amounts of maple syrup and certain meat and vegetable dishes. I've played around with some apple cider vinegar and a lot of different foods. Here's another thing. If you want to make, I mentioned I made fun of white rice earlier. I apologize. I wouldn't use the Be Ready in 1 minute brand, but so if you have a dish that demands white rice, you cut up a couple apples, put it in apple cider vinegar and let it soak. And then right as you can see, rice goes like, you boil it and then it starts to do this and it starts to firm up. As it getting close to firming up, you put that apple cider vinegar and apple mix in there and stir it up. And it really just makes white rice just leap off the plate. Cooking is an area I'm working on. Fermenting foods, my garden, obviously, I've been trying the last few years to get a little bit more on task. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I have zero cooking skills. At some point, perhaps I should maybe like to explore that. Fortunately, my wife loves to cook. She's a great cook. So I'm sort of spoiled in that department. But yeah, very good, Dan. We'll have to try one of your dishes sometime.
But if you do mashed potatoes and make a little bit on the side the first time and see what you think. I was stunned how good it was.
Yeah. YouTube Punk says there's information overload when it comes to food. I mean, all fitness in general, right? I mean, it's just that's the problem of our age, isn't it? Right.
But the nice thing about fitness and Utaba Punk, the nice thing about it, at least in my world, is that there are lines in the sand about things, but you know them. For example, I'm doing a keynote in June, and I'm working on it already. And I think we're to a place, at least at the higher levels of training, and I would include professional. Well, the professional sports strength conditioning isn't what people think, but the collegiate level and the high school level, people are finally figuring out that just because that works at that school or situation, it doesn't work. They run a different set of things with a different set of athletes. We need to train our athletes for our program. And the second you say that, clarity comes to strength and conditioning. We have to train people for our facilities, our program, our vision. And that if you're, you can't always be saying, well, Michigan does this or Penn State does that or Miami does. Yeah, we're not any of those. We're up.
And I think, I think we both recognize the issue that people have with information overload. I mean, again, very few people will come and message me and say, I can't find anything on this subject. I find too much and I don't know which way to go. Right. And I think that explains, Dan, part of why we're so darn repetitious, right? This is like, here are the principles, and this is the theme that we've explored so many times. Look, there are principles that we know matter and work for getting strong, for eating well so that you stay lean and healthy. Things like, hey, get your calories under control, get more protein in, focus on a variety of vegetables, right? Maybe consider fasting every now and then. And once you have those principles in place, or better yet, we could say you can achieve those principles through a variety of means, right? Well, and how you achieve them is less important than the fact that they are achieved, right? And that's kind of a nuance. It's not a highly tribalistic position, so it's kind of hard to sell. But at the end of the day, I think that's correct. I think that's the truth of the matter, and I think that's most helpful to people is saying, hey, a lot of ways you can go about this, but however you go about this, you just have to make sure that you're at least getting like these pieces together, right? Whatever that is.
Yeah, I think I did this last week for you, but oh shoot, now I can't find it. I didn't fold. Oh, maybe it is. Here it is. So this is Tony Robbins' new book, and I don't necessarily like it. It's all about nanobites and all these, a drug that's $1,300 a month to help you with weight loss.
That's odd. Because you've liked his other stuff before, so is he kind of like taking a turn in a different direction?
I didn't like his last one before this, the Money Makeover book either, because you go online and then people that have deals with him will do your investments for you. Deals with him do. I just feel like these are selling, and I'm fine with selling products.
He's sold out. He's a sellout.
But on page 290, he says this: these three simple moves: eating healthily, exercising regularly, and fasting intermittently work wonders. And 99.9% of the people I work with can do those three things. Can I just pop in? There's a couple things I want to say real quick.
Yeah.
First off, good morning, Vinny. Thanks for being here. I also want to say to reach out to my friend Daya. Dale, he passed his cert with flying colors. He got the snatch test done under 4 minutes, which is Lacey Helpert levels of holy shit. But do you mind going down to Reactione's second question? Really, it's down there. It's the one about economics.
Yes. This is Dan. You've actually talked about this before. Trade-offs. And Reaccione wants to know, have you thought about how economics applies to strength training? And indeed, Dan has. So please tell us.
I taught economics in high school for probably 3 to 5 years. And what's interesting about that, Reaccione, is that when I first taught it, I only had about 2 or 3 days of personal finance. When I finished, I would say a third of the course or more was personal finance, and my students still talk to me. These people, we're talking about people in their mid and late 50s now, how that was one of the best things they learned in school. And it wasn't just writing checks and how to have a bank account. It was, So I am very versed in economics. And the one book I recommend for all coaches is Think Like a Freak from the Freakonomics people. And the very first question they ask in the book is, what are you measuring? And as a throws coach, it's great. We're measuring how far the discus goes. So anything that makes the discus go farther is right. Anything that doesn't make the discus go farther is wrong. And once you think that way, life clears up. But if you don't have a measurement, and that's why I'm such a big believer in, I use this to measure the height of my waistline. I use this to measure my waist circumference, because if I have something to measure, this is what my goal is to get my waistline. Well, it already is, but so when I lay down, my waistline is right about here, about 8 inches, which is, of course, they do that to you. I think it's 22 centimeters or something like that. And then I want my waistline to be a certain distance. What you measure is important. And if you don't measure anything, you just don't know. But yeah, I'm a big fan of economics. And I think it is cost to benefit ratio and all the trade-off nonsense I talk about constantly. That's my economics background.
Yeah, and good economists. My undergrad is in economics, by the way. Is good. I'm not claiming to be a good economist. I've never done any professional work in economics, just that general background. But one of the things that was always impressed upon me, and I think is definitely right, is that good economists are those that can sort of reliably forecast, trade-offs that might not be obvious, unintended consequences, right? When it comes to making policy decisions, which I think we've seen an absolute failure of this for the past several years. But one concrete example to drive the point home, I forget what book this was really from, but it's based in something that I think happened in the 80s, right? Apparently, I'm going to get some of the details wrong. People might know the story; they can fact check it. But the general thrust is true. I think a lady was like flying with her kid or something, and the kid was on her lap, and there was turbulence. I think the kid flew up and like hit the ceiling and maybe died. I don't know, died or got hurt or something like that. So the policymakers are saying, okay, we're going to charge extra and make sure that any kid can no longer sit on somebody's lap and has to be buckled in and stuff like that. Like, it sounds like good intention, right? But economists are the people who realize that good intention does not always equate to good policy, because what they found out is, upon subsequent analysis, is the extra costs of flying with those kids now made more people drive, and the statistics worked out that more people died in auto accidents, including more children. So it actually cost more lives of children, that policy, because of what was the unforeseen consequence of that, right? And to be a good economist is to realize that there are scarce resources and various incentives, but to try and be able to predict and forecast trade-offs and consequences that are not immediately obvious before you just put some policy into play just because it sounds good, right? And I would say there's probably a lot of lessons for that when it comes to deciding how you're going to act in the gym or what you're going to eat and stuff like that too. Really trying to forecast what all the consequences are, especially the ones that might not be immediately obvious. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, after World War II, we decided to take all that ammo and turn it into fertilizer, and now the water tables of the Midwest are all drained out because they've been just farming them to death. And my Midwestern friends would know that better than me.
It's yeah. Sometimes you can like say, like, okay, I can see how maybe people might have missed that consequence, right? But other ones, you're like, how did anybody not predict that would happen? Right?
If you overfarm,
was anybody thinking, right?
If you overfarm, you run out of, and you don't have enough water, you run out of water. That is, and you have to be careful because hindsight is clear. But and I think that's why good coaches, are constantly taking notes, retyping notes, because there's always something new that's going to come up. I don't know if you watched the Dallas 49er game, but on the last play of the game, Dallas was trying to trick play that was just, it was unfathomable what they were thinking on that play. And but I know this, every coach in America every football coach, after watching that game, is going to say, we need to practice that last gasp play to win a lot more than we used to think. So like in American football, I can just say that so much of practice now isn't devoted to just running dive right, dive right, dive right, dive right. It's much more situational, because what wins games is still blocking and tackling and protecting the ball. That's always true. But after that, it's making sure you're doing everyone's on the same page in every situation. And that's why it's so important to take notes. And that's why sometimes just having a couple of experienced coaches on a staff, even in the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's, some kid shows up with a condition, and it can be any kind of condition. Oh yeah, we had a kid like this 30 years ago. Here's what we shouldn't do, and here's what we should do.
Yeah, smart. iChef says, I'm 6'4" with a long torso. I found my deadlift variation is the trap bar. I set my body up like a kettlebell swing to start and make sure I hinge as I raise up. Also love rack pulls. Well,
Yeah,
not really a question, but more of a comment. So
I'm a big fan of it. See, I chef. I would much rather see someone doing a rack pull than a trap bar, but that's just because to some of us who are old and grungy, that any of these modern groovy things are you kids and your trap bars.
Yeah, rack pulls great. For a lot of people, depending on Dan, you mentioned, I think this would just fall under broadly genetics, right? Just given people's, the length of the various limbs and stuff like that. It might make sense to not, to do a rack pull or to start the deadlift from pins. You don't have to get the weight all the way to the ground to experience the full range of motion benefit from the deadlift. That is a common mistake, and oftentimes people get distorted mechanics because they feel like if I don't touch the ground every rep, I'm not doing a deadlift. And for a lot of people, that's a mistake, right? Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, I've had my athletes hinge. You do like a reverse deadlift. Hinge, 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 and their hamstrings are completely on fire. And then for them to drop one more inch, I call it folding. They drop one more inch, the hamstrings no longer are stretched out, and all the energy goes into the lower back, and boom, my back hurts. For some people,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. So
folding, that's why I'm a big believer in hinging, but not folding. And we can do a whole thing
good.
again.
Yeah, good distinction. Well, let me pull this one up because this, I think, will be a good one to poise us to talk about the new book here, Dan, before we wrap up. And Riley says, just wanted to stop in and say I'm really enjoying Easy Strength Omnibook. Got 100 pages by accident the first time I sat down with it. Amazing. You just accidentally read 100 pages. Applying the concepts to training my wife, hopefully. So yeah, Dan, that's great. And tell us a little bit more about the book again.
Well, first off, Riley, I appreciate that because I've been striving actually to be much more readable. Some jackass over on one of the forums for an organization I don't belong to said that they don't like my books because I tell 3 stories instead of giving the S&C research. And it made me laugh out loud, Riley, and I'll tell you why. I'm a senior lecturer at St. Mary's University in Twickenham, London. I'm around some of the best researchers in the world. When you talk about restriction training, St. Mary's is a leader in it. And I got to say this about most of the stuff you read. It's pure crap. The S&C research is you get a bunch of stone freshmen and you have them do some jackass thing. And then 3 weeks later, you say, oh, look at the results. Their free throws improved. What the hell? Some of the crap I see. So I really appreciate it. And I'm trying to make my books extremely readable. And I tried real hard on that one. If you want to buy it, folks, easystrengthomnibook.com. You'll get it in all electronic forms, including PDF and Kindle and everything else. People keep asking and when I want to do the printed book. Frankly, I wanted to have a printed book. As you know, I love printed books. I love them. I love holding my books. Having said that, when the amount, and I know you know this, Pat, the amount Amazon gouges from you. If I put it on Barnes and Noble, here's the thing about Amazon. You put my name in, or Pat Flynn, and the first 6 or 7 things are sponsored posts from large corporations doing bodybuilding books. So Dan John Omnibook, it's not there. They took it, but it's not there. danjohnomnibook.com. So if you go to Amazon, you type my name in and never let go, the first 5 or 6 books you'll read are probably like, those pulps that just knock out all those crappy books, all the time. And then finally you'll find my book. And I'm just tired of Amazon gouging me as, when you buy a book for me on Amazon, I don't know what you get, Pat, but it
ain't paying this mortgage. I'll tell you that, Dan.
Nothing. And I'm not like, fighting the man or anything. It's just like
I'm doing it every day.
Fighting the man. I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to be that guy. I'm to the point that I want my audience to get my books, but I don't personally want to feel like I've been gouged every time, and I have been. Amazon gave away 17,000 copies of my Kindle version of Never Let Go, and didn't get, because they made it the free Kindle of, and it's great, except I didn't get a nickel, and 17,000 people got my book. I mean, what business does that? Could you imagine going to a local car dealership and saying, okay, those 17,000 Teslas, we're just going to give those away. And here, Dan, here's a Tesla. Well, I don't want a Tesla. Well, you're going to get it anyway. Well, it's just going to sit in front of my house. Well, good for you. I don't know why I picked Tesla. I don't know why I picked Tesla, but it seemed to bring in people. Okay.
Bezos is a certified corporate crime boss, so this person's a fan.
Yeah. Riley actually had a no, YouTube Punk. It was before Kindle Unlimited. No, it was before.
Yeah, Amazon's done, I don't know how it works, but Amazon's done that with my books a couple of times, where it like puts it on like massive sale almost randomly or stuff like that. Yeah. I don't know how any of that works.
But you got to understand, listeners, we get nothing for it. And so I've even got emails already that says, "What's your next book?" And I'm like, well, my next book is going to be, you come to my house and I'll talk to you,
Be a good book. All right, Dan, let's maybe fire off a quick question this before we say goodbye to Riley. If you had very limited weights, resistance bands, 3, 5, 10, 15-pound dumbbells, and a deconditioned person, how would you progress through easy strength?
Well, the thing, let's do it this way, Riley. First, pick a group of exercises that you trust. It'd be great if it was push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded, carry, but it doesn't have to be. Pick 3 of those exercises and say, I'm going to try to really progress here. And then the other 2 kind of say, I'm just going to get some, these are work things. And just what you want to do with Riley, and you really, you put yourself in a tough position with that there. I mean, a 15-pound dumbbell. But the idea is, maybe for you, is to practice these moves 3 to 5 days a week. And you're going to have to go higher reps. So we're already out of easy strength, but you're okay. And then make sure you walk after. So if in a situation like what I work at the senior center, I always recommend vertical press. We don't necessarily hang with some of the people, but we do like an assisted hang.
Mm-hmm.
You can just grab onto something and lean back. Anything that pulls the shoulders out. Any kind of, for you to hinge with your bands, you could do some hinging. You can stand on the bands, put them around your shoulders like a cape, and you can just do. Actually, that's not bad at all. I have those big, wide, thicker ones also, and you can just put them around your shoulders, and you can do the hinge movement. Do your best to do an ab movement. Do your best to do something else, and then go for a walk. But Riley, I would look into the easy strength for fat loss section towards the rear to get you going. We've had people talk here about, and there's the other thing. And Nathaniel said something interesting. He goes, I'd love a paper copy. You know what most of my readers did in the past anyway, is they go to, there's these little stores that will print them off. In fact, when I had interns at Juan Diego, one of the jobs was the interns was to take, to print and 3-hole punch. For those of you who don't know what a 3-hole punch is. So you take, you print off, you 3-hole punch the pages, and then you put the pages in a 3-ring binder, and there's your printed book. And the upside of that is
you can design your own cover too.
Well, I already have a cover for you, but so sometimes that's just as good. And here's the thing. There is extra cost to you, but
but that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's okay. I print stuff off all the time. Big fan of printing stuff. My favorite. If I have nothing else to do, I'll say I want to go print some stuff.
My biggest regret is that I had all this great printed stuff from 1998 to about 2001, And one of my assistant coaches or interns or something said, well, you don't need to keep that. That's on the internet. It'll be there forever. Well, it wasn't.
False.
All this, I had all this great stuff. These emails from Art Devaney. I had all these things that I printed off.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I had all these all this great stuff. And then I said, okay, I'll throw them away. Now, people are saying things like, physical books will never be obsolete. I agree. But my point is, as the writer, when it goes to printed books, we suddenly become, or even Kindle, all of a sudden we get no reward for it. And it's great. And here's the thing. For all you guys who share all my PDFs on these little sites like Scrivener and all that, whatever it's called, Scrivener is my typing thing. All it does is make me not want to write books. And it's funny because there was a person, someone I know, who used to get a whole bunch of book drafts and then would put them up for free on these various sites. And well, that person is now, I would like to commission a handwritten copy of the book. Vinny, that's why I keep you around. So Vinny, I'm going to handwrite. No, I'm going to do calligraphy. I'll write the whole book. I'll write, I'll calligraphy Easy Strength Omni book. Actually, I have a friend, Alyssa, who does great calligraphy. It takes about 3 days a page. Book's about 400 pages.
We'll get an Etsy shop together. We'll figure out the price and we'll put the link up. Yep.
I'm thinking around $250,000. Okay,
I think probably.
You're a strength coach, Vinny, so you got the money.
Easy. Anyways, grab the digital copy, friends, if you haven't done it.
Buy the book, for God's sake.
Just get the digital copy.
EasyStrengthOmniBook.com. And if you're listening, you should buy it. And here's the other thing I'm going to ask you to do. Okay, folks, 2 things you have to do. First, EasyStrengthOmniBook.com. Buy my book. And then number 2, would you please would you please subscribe? Would you ring the bell here? Pat Flynn's sitting over here. This guy, Pat Flynn, my friend Pat Flynn.
No credit, no rewards.
Nothing. Like it. How hard is it to press the like button?
Come on, people.
I'm so angry.
Give us a little something. Thank you as always, Dan. Yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you as always, gentle listeners. We will see you guys next week. Goodbye. Goodbye.